This podcast is brought to you by Barry's Tea. Recently, I visited the home of Barry's Tea in Cork and saw firsthand the skill and expertise of their master blender, making sure that every cup of Barry's Tea is of the highest quality. As a chef, I'm obsessed with flavour, and for me, Barry's Tea is the best tasting tea in Ireland. More than that, it also brings with it a sense of home, belonging and connection. Just one sip of Barry's Tea and you're home. So stick the kettle on, make a cup of Barry's Tea and enjoy the podcast.
Who was I fangirling? I was do you know Ruth Rogers?
No.
Aha.
Is that bad?
So I know more. Yes, it is. So have you heard of a guy called Jamie Oliver?
Yeah, he's good. Yeah.
So where did Jamie
never
Oliver
responds to my emails.
Where did Jamie Oliver train?
Okay, gotcha.
Where did you
River
train?
Cafe, London.
Yes. So who's
the Ruth Rogers?
Who owns the? Yes.
So I don't know why I thought it was a musician.
No, Ruth Rogers, and Ruth Rogers' husband was a very famous architect.
Okay.
Richard Rogers. He designed the Pompidou Centre in Paris, and he designed Lloyd's Bank in London. Loads of so I kind of would have always been a huge fan of Richard Rogers, and then discovered Ruth Rogers, the architecture route, not the food route, because the River Cafe.
They kind of tore up the rule book from a cooking sense at the time.
Well, and because I got into that then, because she opened up the River Cafe as a canteen for his practice, so that the lads in the office would have somewhere to go for lunch. And then she kind of herself found Rose Gray was the other chef. They were there, like in London, you could either go to a cafe or you could go to a fancy restaurant. There was nowhere in between where you could go in your jeans and have really nice food that was unpretentious, but that you could get really, really good food, but without having to dress up.
Yeah.
And so they did. That was the first.
And they won a Michelin star.
For it, yeah.
Which was probably one of the first of those sort of casual.
Yeah. And now that's like, I if I have to wear a jacket, I'm not going.
Yeah. Me too.
It's not my kind of restaurant. If there's a dress code, you're grand.
Yeah, I'm giving you money.
You keep your food.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want it. I want to go in as myself, and because I think if people can't express, like, for me, a restaurant is food, yeah, but it's everything. It's the music, it's the decor, it's the vibe, it's also the people in it, and the kind of, I love people watching, and I love watching what people. So if somebody is being told what to wear, they're not coming as themselves.
Yeah.
They're coming as what the restaurant wants them to be. And I actually find that obnoxious.
Well, I love that you're describing it almost like going to restaurants as a sort of cultural experience. We spend money on lots of different experiences in our life.
I go to cities around the world, and I want to go to small local restaurants. I don't like to go into chains. And even if the food is only okay, I want to see how the locals live. Yeah. I want to see what the culture is like here. And there's very few places I've been really lucky. Like, I've done kind of series like Incredible Homes, where I've gone into people's houses and I've spent the entire day with them, and that might seem like, oh yeah, that grand, he met them. No, I literally, like, filming an episode of that, like filming one house can take 8 hours, right? The amount of time we're on camera talking is probably 2. Yeah. I spend 6 hours making small talk with them.
Yeah. And absolutely exhausting.
Absolutely exhausting. But you learn so much. You learn so much about people through their houses, why they design things. And I go into, and why did you put that above the fridge? Yeah. And why? Because we've nothing else left to talk about. So I end up learning so much and I think it's the same with food and restaurants. Exactly. When you go to a culture and seeing what they bring out in big plates and when small plates, like, I mean, like, what will they all share? And the different cultures, like it's really rude in even in Spain, it's kind of rude to go out and order your own dish. We'd always have a fixer with us, somebody who kind of drives the truck with us in it and all that. And I'd get my dinner, and then suddenly their spoon comes in and goes into my dinner, and I'm there, what are you doing? This is, no, but here we share.
That's the way food should be.
Yeah. And so, okay, right. And you lean into it and you kind of say, right, okay. But the first time the spoon came across the table, I was there like, okay. So I think, like, there's so much how people eat and how they gather, and the music and the setting, whether it's low lights, whether it's everything, and the food is part of that. It's an experience, I think food is something we all need. It's fuel, it's nourishment, but how we have it is the joy. So there's lots of different components can make it a joyful experience. So first of all, it's the food. If you can make good food, great. Then if you can have nice music on in the background, brilliant. Can you put a bunch of flowers on the table? it doesn't have to be anything, but just, can you get a nice napkin? Can you get, can we dim the lights? And I'm obsessed with lighting in restaurants because I can do that in my project. So I go into restaurants and I'm looking.
I can see your brain working in front of me here as well, of how you're applying your architecture to.
Well, it's everything.
Into how a restaurant will work or food.
Yeah. Because
how you make people feel.
Yes, and it's all of that, and it's kind of, you layer up all of these experiences, and then you can learn. Like I always remember. I'm going off really randomly here, but it's something I'm really passionate about.
We'll introduce you eventually.
Eventually, I'm Dermot. This is Mark. But I remember going to Stockholm, right? And I don't know if you've ever been to the Scandinavian countries, right? And we were there Christmas, right? So it was coming up the week before Christmas, so it's the darkest time of the year. And I was kind of wondering when we were going over there, because we were going over to do a series, and I wonder, how do they get, like, do they fake up natural light? Because it was dark, like at 11 o'clock when we were leaving, it was still dark.
Yeah, there's only about 3 hours of light.
3 hours of light in the summer. And they're like, I wonder what do they do here? There must be something really ingenious that they do to create natural light to stop them all getting really depressed.
Something most people never think about as well.
Never think, yeah. And then we went into kind of, you go for your lunch. Went into kind of, they have all these little underground restaurants in Stockholm. And nobody had light. They weren't trying to fake it up. It was all candlelight. And they kind of, they embraced it. Yeah. They embraced the darkness, and they kind of said, no, it's the winter time. We all gather around candlelight. There was nobody trying to make spaces really bright. And I always remember, like, some of the restaurants we went to when we went to Stockholm, and I remember as much about the light as I do about the
anything
food.
Else that happened.
The food, yeah. And we stayed in this old prison, which was really cool. It was Skepholmen is the name of an island, and it was an old prison, and each room was a cell. And then they had, but I always remember the restaurant because it was proper Scandinavian design. Yeah. White panelled walls, food was laid out, even in, for evening dinner. It was kind of half service to table, half buffet. It was just, and I remember the smells. Like, they had these candles, and I loved the smell of the candle. I bought one for my wife on the way home. But everything, all the senses are gathering around food.
You sound obsessed with this. That would be the word I would. Even in the 10 minutes we've spoken,
because
it's an obsession.
You see, what you're doing is I design houses primarily, right? Yeah. And there's three. You eat, you sleep, and you relax.
Yeah.
Eating is a huge part of what happens in houses. Yeah, gathering.
Most people spend time in my house just in the kitchen or around the kitchen. I would
spend most of my time in our house around the kitchen table.
Yeah.
Everybody who calls into the house is around the kitchen table. So it's not the upset. It's just, this is my job. My job is to find the ultimate way to dine and to change that up, because breakfast is totally different to lunch. Lunch is totally different to somebody calling over for a cup of coffee. The cup of coffee is totally different to somebody sitting around having a couple of glasses of wine. Then you got date night at home. You've got a dinner with all your friends. You got Christmas dinner. You got the celebration, and you can take the one table and you can change that up no matter what time of the day it is, no matter what the light conditions are. And I'm obsessed with that.
Nobody, and I speak from myself. I don't think many people think about this.
They don't have to. I'm here for that.
That's true. Yeah, at a large price. I better introduce you while we were.
I'm not at a large price.
Why, right?
Well, we'll see how much we have to pay for one of your dinners.
So 15 minutes in. Welcome to Roasted. So this is basically...
Is this Roasted?
This is Roasted.
I should have read the email.
With me, you should have read the email. So the whole idea of these chats is we want to find out a bit more about notable people through food, because for me, food's the great leveler.
Yeah.
You are Dermot Bannon.
Yeah.
And I did some fantastic research.
Go on.
As I do for these things. And some hilarious stuff came up. I'm sure you know half of it. Well, the first thing with this is what we do is we ask everyone for basically for people listening at home, we send out an email, very professional, with parking details and all that, blah, 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 blah. And then what I do is I ask for one sort of dish or ingredient that is sort of on your mind or something you like at the moment. So the Irish architect and TV personality Dermot Bannon came back with, and I had to write it out because it was an insight. I
was trying to be really good.
This was a real insight. I was trying to
give you options. I was trying to give you loads of options.
This was an insight into you, and having spent 20 minutes with you here, bang on, how you can tell someone's personality from
Go on.
something like an
so,
email. So,
do you want to read out the list? Because and do you know? So I was trying to be really diligent.
No, but it's brilliant.
Because I was trying to give you loads of options. Because it said in the email, right? Everybody who's listening to this, it said Mark might cook it, and then so I was thinking I could be really mean here and kind
guys, we're not supposed to be saying that. That's why I'm getting all these wild ingredients. Go on.
That's what. But I was trying to make it easy for you, so I was kind of giving you easy and simple. But anyway, what did you
So
garnish?
we get back this email and I go, this is a real insight into this man's head. So we get 1, a stuffed Sorrentino with fresh pesto lemon sauce.
Yes.
2, a whole barbecue sea bass with lemon.
Yeah.
3, a good chicken biryani.
Yeah.
Then we get a paragraph. I tend to like simple food where ingredients are the stars. Think River Cafe London.
Yeah.
Or else all out flavour from Indian food.
Yeah.
Then it continues. Another bullet point, walnut, amaretto and chocolate cake.
Yeah.
Very, very prescriptive.
Yes.
And then it goes
I forgot I wrote that.
beetroot and anything.
Yeah.
And then a little note for the chef. I don't like goat's cheese.
Because normally beetroot is paired to goat's cheese.
Yes. Well, but I was like, this man is all over everything. Number 2, tomatoes. And
Yeah.
number 3, cauliflower. Email ends.
Yeah.
So, in front of you.
What did you learn from that? Because I just thought I learned loads of options.
I read that and I said, there's a man who, not going to say talks, but like you talk out your thoughts. In the same way I do when I'm talking about food.
Yeah.
I will talk. And what I really should be doing is,
Listening.
in my job, is not listening, but kind of
I should be doing more.
compartmentalizing it into a bit more of a digestible.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, not that there's definitely a creative mind going on here. It also obviously gives me an amazing insight that you clearly know food and you clearly have a grow for, I would say, Mediterranean coast and probably Italy.
Yes.
So we'll come back to all those things.
Yeah.
So in front of you, you have, I went with tomato.
Oh, I thought there was a beetroot.
So slow cooked, so what Dermot has in his little spoon, slow cooked Dadarini tomato. Again, going back to your River Cafe idea, just really good ingredients.
Yeah.
So it's been cooked really slowly, 12 hours.
12 hours?
Yeah, stuffed with cream
I
cheese.
I hope you batch cooked that.
Oh, yeah.
You don't get much out of that for the 12 hours.
It's coming off a menu. I'm doing a bit of private dining this week.
Right, okay, sorry.
So I was doing it anyway.
Okay, so
a little bit of black olive, fennel, and then stuffed with cream cheese, anchovy, espelette, pepper, capers. And
wow,
it's
there's stuff inside.
Yeah, so it's a one-biter. There's some beautiful olive oil on the base as well. Not sure it's going to go with your coffee, which is almost out, by the way, in case we want to top Dermot up.
And also I did, because when I saw the size of the dish that was placed in front of me, I quickly, I ate a rocky road on the way in. So I'll cleanse my palate. Do you want me to eat this now?
So while you stuff your face,
Okay.
I was struck as well. I want to get more into sort of the personal side of you as well.
Hold on a second now. Let me enjoy this. This is...
No, that's not. This is my podcast.
That is amazing.
It's intense.
Mm.
It's actually what you were talking about architecture there, and we'll come on to it it's like take one thing and make it the best
really,
it can
really
be of
good.
itself.
Yeah.
Don't put loads of shit around it.
See, because what you were asking me in those questions, and I was kind of going back to, you were there, anything in your memory, and tomatoes, the last incredible homes we did was in Spain. And like, we were up in Catalonia. And I remember they just give you bread and tomatoes, and you're supposed to wipe the tomatoes onto the bread in the morning. And there was so many different ways of cooking tomatoes. It's an amazing ingredient, and it's kind of
particularly there where they actually taste like tomatoes.
And even we were on holidays in Mallorca a couple of years, and this tiny little restaurant, and myself and my daughter went for lunch one day, and it was just they had 3 things on it, and one of them was the ravioli, and I was trying to remember what was in the middle of it, so that's why I kind of left you hanging on that one. And I couldn't remember because it was a pesto and lemon sauce, but it's really simple.
Yeah.
And we got about 4 of them. And my daughter would be a bit of a foodie as well. And like the 2 of us are ooh and an an over this, and like eating 4.
What age is she?
She is 19.
Okay, yeah.
So she just likes food, but again, this was only a small little kind of. It wasn't the fanciest place in the town. It was a tiny little place, and the 2 of us went there together. It's not. We like doing those kind of things. Kind of the 2 of us are foodies, and
How many kids you have?
3.
And do they all love you?
Do they what?
Do they all love you?
Deep down. Very deep down. No, I think it's lovely to share a bit of a passion with kids. And myself and my daughter, she was very young at the time, she was about 11. Well, it's not very young, but we headed off to Barcelona for a daddy-daughter trip. And what I do remember, we did all the Gaudi stuff and we did the architecture. We went down to the Picasso. We did all that kind
Is
of stuff.
she into that? Or just by default of...
Not
who
as
dad
much as
is?
me. Not as much as me. But in fairness to her, I saw her because I was watching her. You go around some of the Gaudi apartments with the headphones on, and she was watching, and I could see her because I knew what they were saying, and I could see her kind of. But the nicest part of that is on day one, I had a list of all the buildings we were going to go and see because I'd been to Barcelona a few times, and I said, right, we're going to start off at the Sagrada Familia, then we'll go up to do the Park Güell, and then we'll work our way down. Anyway, we got to Sagrada Familia, and I said, I'd like to buy a ticket. And she says, oh, great, you can go in tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. I said, what? Well, yeah, there's queues. I said, what? The last time I'd been there was 1992.
Okay.
And there was no queues. And there was queues this time. So I said,
Over an architect.
Over Gaudi. Oh, don't you start. Gaudi is anyway.
Gaudi is Ramsey.
He is. Is Ramsey good? Yeah. Without the attitude. But so I said, okay, grand. We bought the ticket for tomorrow. I said, right, up to the Park Güell. Same thing. You can get in tomorrow at lunchtime. So we got our first day in Barcelona. We'd only 3 days there. So what are we going to do? I said, right, we'll walk down. The Park Güell is at the top of Barcelona. The Ramblas is at the bottom. I said, we'll walk down the way. And that took us about 6 hours. And we stopped and we had coffee. We had a little cake. And because we were just kind of walking down random streets, we stopped for a bit of tapas. We got down to the Ramblas. We got to the Picasso Museum. Again, couldn't get into that. Found a little coffee shop beside it. Had our lunch in there. And then we actually started wandering around Barcelona just having food. And what was really lovely about Barcelona is that it's tapas, right? So you can get a small dish. If you don't like it, it's €1.50.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. But it meant she could try things without feeling that she had to order it. So she loved going up to the bar and saying, can I have one of those? And I have one of those. And it just opened up this whole other world. For her, experimenting and trying different things without it feeling like I can't order it. What happens if I don't like that? If you don't like it, I'll eat it.
But it's cool because most people would say for an 11-year-old to go to Barcelona and have a whole itinerary of eating nice food and
But we did it by
architecture.
accident. No, we had an itinerary of architecture. We had no itinerary of food. This happened by accident because we just started wandering. And it literally was, let's wander. I said to her, let's walk to the next metro station. So we did. And I said, we walked to the next one. And we ended up doing the entire, from the top to the bottom in Barcelona by foot, because we were walking to the next metro station. And then we said, we just keep walking. And then we stopped and we had food, coffee. And we allowed it. And we allowed it to happen. And it wasn't planned. If we'd planned it, it wouldn't have happened because I would have been, you know me, I would have been looking for the best tapas restaurant. I couldn't have got a booking. I would have sent a list. I would have sent a list.
Thousands of.
I would have been the person on trying to email them 4 months in advance. And I think sometimes when you let things happen and they're spontaneous, they're much better because I do overthink things. That's my problem in life is that if you give me something to do, I'll have to do it the best way. I'll have to do it. And I know it's wrong. And I've been battling against that all my life because everybody goes out to me, you have to do it this way, Dermot, don't you? And I know they're right and I know I'm wrong. But so the fact that happened by accident was such a pleasure and a joy because the two of us were excited because I didn't have loads of stuff planned for her in my head. We were both on this together and we both sat down, like, do you remember that little churro that we got her? That little thing? Wasn't that cool? And she says, yeah. And it was just lovely. So I always, the two of us kind of shared that passion.
I find it fascinating as well because like you're on what? 18th season heading into the TV show Room to Improve or heading towards
17.
17.
You're aging me.
So you're clearly one of you're one of the most notable faces in Ireland.
Am I?
You would be.
Well.
But I'd be always saying with your kids or your family out and about, I'm only starting to get it now where you're on TV for a couple of years and then all of a sudden people start to stop you in the street, or how do they react to that?
I suppose because
my wife hates it.
They just avoid me.
Yeah.
So they kind of, if we're wandering off somewhere and people stop me, they keep going and I have to catch up with them.
Yeah.
Look, I suppose it happened to me very, very slowly, the whole Room to Improve thing and kind of becoming well known in this country. And like, I don't know. Some people give out about it and some people say, oh, I'd love my anonymity back and all that. I'm not saying I love it, but I get a lovely reaction off people. Like, and I spend a lot of time when a new show comes out in air, asking people, you go on radio shows, you'll do newspaper interviews to tell people about the new series. You want people to know it's on, and you spend an awful lot of time and effort telling people a new series is on. And then when they watch it and they want to come up and talk to you about it,
It's part of the gig.
it's not part of the gig. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah,
like,
okay,
it's
yeah.
not, I don't see it as part of I just think, wow, you've given up your time to watch my TV show. I will, of course, talk to you about it, because I've spent 17 years asking them to come on this journey. And like, other genres of TV programs are like cooking. There's been cookery shows for a long
Forever.
What I started doing was a little bit different.
And were you the first?
Duncan Stewart was the first, I think, in Ireland.
Okay.
And I don't think there was any shows like this. Grand Designs obviously was there a couple of years before me. But this was...
Talk to me about how it started, the Room to Improve.
Oh, it's just
because it's a phenomenal success. Like, it's
wrong place at the wrong time. I was working in an architect's practice. I was very happy in my job. I loved my job, working out in Dunleary, and there was an ad on the RAI website, which is the Royal Institute of Irish Architects, and it was they were looking for somebody for a show called House Hunters, which was the Irish version of Location, Location, Location. And they had an estate agent on it, and they had an architect. So Roisin Murphy was the architect. And I always thought, that's a pretty cool job, what she does. So she used to do, when you were looking at fixer-uppers, Roisin used to do up a quick sketch and say, look, don't discount this house because you could make it into this. And Roisin went on maternity leave, and an ad for her job came up in the thing. And I remember sitting in the office, and I said, will I, won't I? Will I or won't I?
What year is this now?
This would have been 2006.
Okay.
96, 2006 is all to me. It's all the same to me when you get to my age. But it's, and I remember there's a guy sitting beside me in the office, right? And he just said, he turned around, and I was kind of humming, will I do it? There was part of me really wanted to do it. And the other part of me was there, no, just leave it, Dermot. You're grand. You have a good job. Leave it. And then the guy sitting beside me says, I just rang that number about that job, and, on telly. I says, I think I'd be good at it. And I say, I can't let him get the job. So I went into the conference room and I made the phone call, and I didn't realise at the time that was a phone interview. I thought I was just leaving my details. And anyway, so because I was having a bit of a chat with them, and I just thought they were incredibly friendly. But that was a phone interview. I got a screen test, and I said, oh, right, okay. So I kept going along with this.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And then...
This wasn't planned. It was just
It was not planned. This was a random phone call on a random day after seeing it. And, and I didn't chase this.
And a competitive edge. You've gone...
Yeah, a little bit. But I didn't chase this, and I didn't want it. It wasn't something I woke up one morning and said, right, my 5-year plan is to get on television. Okay. It certainly wasn't. I went into the conference room, made the phone call, came out there, thought nothing of it, and then I got a phone call saying, can you come up and do a screen test? And I said, okay, right. It was in Blackrock, and I was working in Dunleary, so it wasn't that far away. Went up to the screen test again, thought nothing. I left, and I got the phone call to say I got the job. And I was there, oh God, I already have a job. And I said, what am I going to do? So I spent 2 days sweating it. What am I going to do? Will I just turn it down? Or will I do it? Oh, it's a nice... I love watching the show, and I loved what Roisin did. Oh, now I get a chance to be Roisin's job. Oh. So I went into my boss and I said, look, can I just take a month off to do this? And they said, right, okay, go and do it. And I went and did it, got it out of my system. I think brilliant. And it was all ended, and I went back to work, and it was all great. And then I got a phone call to say, look, RT would like to do something different with you. And we'd like to, there's a format Room to Improve, which we kind of, all of us discussed at lunch, because back then people were spending a huge amount of money on stamp duty. So if you bought a house, you were paying something like 10% in stamp duty. So if a house was, 600 grand, stamp duty was 60. And I said, but you'd fix the problem with their old house for the 60 grand. And, so this kind of, so I got this phone call from the producer, and I was kind of finished with television. She says, so there's good news and bad news. And she said, you're not going to be doing House Hunters again, but you're going to be doing Room to Improve. And I said, oh God, how am I going to do this? So I had to go back into, so I kind of let it. I didn't say anything to anybody for a couple of days. And then I had to go back into my boss, and he was there, you're serious? And I said, I don't know. I don't know whether I'm serious or not. And I kind of said, oh, I'll do it, and I'll make the jump. I did the series.
Did you have to give up the job to do the series?
No, I kind of did 3 days in the office and 2 days making the series. It was hell. And then I finished the series. I said, oh, thank God, I'm never going to do this again. Never, ever going to do this again. I'm sure then the series kind of...
17 seasons later.
Yeah, so it kind of got to season... I still worked in the practice until the end of series number 2.
Okay.
And then I went in and... they said to me, look, it's really difficult you being away from the office and all, because like I was old enough, I was 35, so I had responsibilities in there. Like I had clients of my own. I was and they just said, right, but we'd like to make you an associate partner, but you have to give up the telly. And I said, oh God. I always end up in these situations where I have these big life decisions and I end up wandering around streets. What am I going to do? And
without wanting to stop you there though, because all of a sudden, like your season 2, you're becoming the celebrity architect on TV.
Yeah.
And like, well, I've had it on the side from the chef thing where everyone who's doing the groundwork day take on, there's your man now out doing his fancy pants on the TV thinking he's all known. Is there an element of that in that role?
I was really kind of a little bit kind of, I used to go to, like we were dealing a lot with the HSE and with departments of education and stuff like that, so I would go into a new meeting room and then half the room, is it your man? I think it is your man. Is it your man? Sorry, are you were you on telly last?
And you're kind of saying, well, not on this part of the job.
Not here. But it was fine. I suppose like I loved what I was doing and I loved the projects I was on and I loved the scale of them. And when I was given that ultimatum, I did. And I suppose one of the things that pushed me to, my dad had just died. Like he died. He never saw room to improve. He died just a month before it went to air. So there was a lot of things at that stage of my life. Again, we were having my son James. He was just born. And I was kind of, that part of your life, when something major like that happens, you tend to either stay on track or you kind of take a parallel. And it was kind of that pushed me and said, do you know something? If I was a partner in the practice, I'd probably want me on the television. I think it would be good for the practice. So I said, if that was my decision. So I went into him and I just said, look, I think I'm going to go on my own. I'm going to set up my own practice.
Most people at that point with what was going on would say, you know what, I'm going to keep in the stable job and try and keep some stability.
That is true. But no, I didn't. I went in and I said, look, I'm really sorry. I'm going to give it a go on my own and do another series of the television. And he turned around to me, he said, I'm so glad you said that to me. He says, I didn't want to push you, and it was the nicest thing. Jeez, I'm getting emotional about that. But it was the nicest thing that anybody ever said to me, that you go and do what you need to do.
Did you expect that response?
No. And it was Bernard Maloney, and he said that to me in the day, and it meant so much. Because you feel like you're letting people down when I can't believe I'm getting emotional about this. Like,
but it's a huge time in your life.
Well, no, it's just like every once in a while you kind of come across people who are a big support to you. And at the time, that meeting, and he just said, I'm so delighted you've said that to me. You've made the right decision. And I thought I was letting them down because I'd been with the company for nearly 10 years and I was going in and I was telling, it's not easy. And there was nothing wrong with my job. I didn't hate my job. I loved it. I was leaving for kind of really obscure, like nobody leaves a job to go in because I'm starting a television career.
Yeah.
Nobody.
It's crazy.
It is. And I remember just that day and I think that's all I needed, and kind of he believed in me, and when somebody like that tells you you're making the right, honestly, that wind that goes into your sails is brilliant. So yeah, and then 3 days later Lehman's Bank went down.
Well, that was again in my research. I had you set up Dermot Bannon Architects
in 2008
in what month, do you know?
October.
So Lehman's had just collapsed and you're in an architecture business on your own. In
a warehouse on the North Circular Road with an electric heater at my feet looking for new clients, because the television paid money, but it didn't pay enough to get me through the year. And we also had...
Young family.
We had my daughter, it was 3, and a son,
so tell me how that feels. I know I want to talk about food at some point, but how does that feel when you go, okay, I've made the jump. Amazing that you have this mentor as well, who it gives you probably that final push. Yeah. But then all of a sudden the cold reality in October of 2008
Yeah.
sets in. What are you thinking?
Ooh, what am I thinking? I was excited because I had we'd enough to get by with kind of clients that I had in the office. We just enough to get by, and I was excited by it. I wasn't daunted. Like it was a challenge, and it kind of I'm never when you put me in a difficult situation, I kind of always think of my way out of it as opposed to, oh my God, how did I end up here? You know, because I'm that kind of person. I always like when things get really tricky. And again, it was another influential person in my life was my first producer in television, Hillary, and she gave me this thing at the beginning, like whenever you're in a really tricky situation, how bad can it get? Go to the worst. What's the worst thing that can happen here? Right? And then work backwards from that. And then if you have a solution always to the worst case scenario, you're grand. And I always do that. So I always think, okay, what's the worst that can happen here? Grand. Okay. And if we got there, I'll deal with it that way. And I've always been like that in my life. I don't mind adversity. I don't mind.
You strike me as a very positive person.
I can have my moments, but yeah, no, I do. I tend to have kind of. There's always a way to do things. There's always a way when things get really bad. There's always certain things in life. I suppose, like losing my dad a couple of years before that. There's certain things are a full stop that you can't ever change and that you live parallel to, and then there's other things you can change. And so there's going to be moments in your life where you just can't change it, and you can do nothing about that. And they're the bits that you get upset about. The other bits, there's loads of ways. There's always a way around things, and there's always a way to solve. So I wasn't in a panic. I was more excited than, even though I was sitting there in a big warehouse, because I was renting a bit of a warehouse, but there was no walls like in it. And then slowly that warehouse became a little creative hub, and Jennifer Slattery moved in. She makes textiles. Duff Tisdale were an architectural practice. They owned the building and they moved back into it. And it slowly kind of started to fill up with creative. So when I was going down the stairs to get a cup of coffee, you were chatting to people who were making stuff out of leather. You were textiles, architects, furniture designers. And it became a lovely... So it all kind of just started to take a step up bit by bit. And I loved it.
And if you got through the first 3 years of that business with the global crisis, sure, it would have boomed after that.
It didn't boom. No, never.
Still hasn't boomed.
No, well, it's still a job. Yeah. And you know, a lot of I'm quite thankful that I kind of set up at probably the worst time in Ireland's economy over the last 30 years, because, well, I don't know if it was because the 80s were pretty grim. You weren't around for that. I was. But it teaches you a lot.
It goes back to what you said. It's the worst.
Yeah, it teaches you to be frugal, to kind of to I don't know. I taught the recession and kind of setting up by myself. You never take anything for granted. Yeah. You're always very thankful for a client, and every time the phone rings and it's a new client in the office, I still think, because of the mindset of that, I'm grateful. You know,
take me back to where this interest came from, and again, and what from.
Are we talking about food here? Or are we talking about
even from a food perspective, even from chatting to you here and what you sent in? And the parallels you've described between food or restaurants and design and architecture and creating experiences. Like, did food play a role in your
upbringing?
Yeah. Or where did this interest in
my mum
design come from?
My mum is a home economics. In the designer food, what are we doing?
Well, both.
Well, I suppose food. My mum is a home economics teacher. So food was a huge part of huge, because mum made everything from scratch.
Yeah.
Everything. Like, we never even got a bloody processed burger, and all we wanted was a processed burger.
Yeah.
I remember going to a shopping centre with my friend once. His mum was doing the shopping, and the two of us were going over to look in the record shops or whatever. And then his mum bought us lunch in a cafe in a shopping centre in the 80s. And I remember getting this burger, and it was really thin, and the bun was really squashed, and I just thought, this is real heaven. And she said, it's probably been microwaved. I was there, oh my God, it's been microwaved. I remember going home to my mum, I want a microwaved burger. Now, my friend's mum was being really derogatory about it, and she said, this is probably the worst of the worst. Because my mum, when we had burgers and chips on a Friday, my mum made the chips.
Okay.
My mum made the burgers. There was onions in it.
Class.
But we didn't want the onions. I wanted the processed burger. I wanted the really flat one that you got in the chipper.
Yeah.
But mum never, ever, ever everything was made from scratch in our house, because that's what so.
What did your dad do?
My dad was a horticulturalist, so he was so vegetables and like so. His passion was he worked for Chagas, so he would have like there was always. It's funny because they experimented on food. That's what he did. Like so, they found better ways to grow things using. Back then, like I suppose it's not as trendy now, fertilizers and all that, but that was back, trying to get crops.
Feeding a growing population.
But get crops to have bigger yields. So we'd have bags of potatoes, and we were never allowed to eat that's one of my little luxuries in life now, is eating the potato skins, on a baked potato.
Yeah.
Because we were never allowed to eat them as kids, because that's, I wouldn't eat the skin.
Eat too much.
But like there was always, and Dad worked in Kinseely. So there's a research centre there, and there was polytunnels, so there's mushrooms, there's tomatoes, there was... I remember, because I grew up in Malahide, and a lot of my friends' parents worked in Aer Lingus, and they would have got free travel all over the world, and we got free spuds. And I just said, Dad, if you'd just taken a different direction.
Yeah.
But it was
that for an exposure for a kid of that age at that time in Ireland
to veg.
It would never have had that.
I suppose because especially because it was in Dublin, and I suppose maybe the kids who grew up down the country, because I had all my relations lived down in Waterford and Wexford. They would have been on farms. They would have seen, but I suppose we wandered through polytunnels. As kids, like when we went to collect Dad from work or whatever, like you went running through the polytunnels, and that was so. I suppose between my mum and my dad, there was always kind of it was food, and everything. Like we never went to restaurants. There was no restaurants when we were kids. Like there was, you went for your communion, your confirmation. That was about it. But Mum loved dinner parties and having the aunts and uncles over. But like she'd spend 3 days preparing food. Like, so I remember what was one of her dishes? I was always obsessed with, and I still remember, beef olives. So she used to get really thin slivers of beef, and she'd stuff them with I can't remember it now, and then she'd sew them up, and then these would go on for like 3 days in preparing stuff. So food was kind of, it was a big thing in our house.
And would you be at these dinner parties?
No.
Who was that? Who was invited to these?
Adults.
Yeah, okay.
I wasn't. No, we were upstairs, sitting on the stairs, waiting to see could we hear any conversation. But everything in our dinners were always like a big thing in our house, and sitting down for dinner and having. And I'm saying that I didn't always like the dinner. Like my mum and dad used to love this Irish stew. Do you know the one with the floaty bones in it and all?
Oh
that?
Yeah.
Oh, I have not ate lamb since then.
Really?
I just didn't like it as a kid, and don't like that Irish stew. I've tried even like eating lamb later on in life. I can't even go into somebody's house if they're cooking lamb in the oven.
It's a lot of people like that.
I don't know, and it was that because Mum used to go into town just to kind of get away from the kids for a couple of hours on a Saturday, and she'd leave Dad a big pot of the stew, and I just couldn't eat it, and but so. Yeah, it was, and all I wanted was a microwave burger. As a kid, just wanted junk food, but it was the food was a big part, and every occasion had food around it. And we used to go down to. I was lucky because we were the only relations living in Dublin. So my mum is from just outside New Ross, a place called Campile, and we'd go down to because my mum was a teacher. She's a home economics. She'd have the months off during the summer, and we'd all go down. We'd go down to my granny's house for sometimes a month at a time, and that was all about food. Like there was a big agate cooker in the middle of the kitchen, and there was rashers made on that in the morning. And like when I think about it, like this anthracite used to go in on top. There was proper coal scuttle. Like people have this romantic idea of an agate, and I always remember it as being a huge amount of work. But I always remember it was funny because my granny and her sister lived together, and like they had nothing to do really, only cook the dinner all day.
Yeah.
So sometimes the day started off with a really early breakfast of rashers, and then they used to have this thing called rasher gravy, which was basically just a lard, and they'd put it over your brown bread.
Savage. Fried bread.
Gorgeous, but really bad for you. But they, so then you go to the shops. And you go down. There was a cooperative in Campile, the Shelburne Co-op, and so kind of food came from farms and all that around. And so the menu was decided when you went down to the shops. I make this sound very pretentious. It was like they kind of knew what they were going down to get a chicken, but I always remember with my granny because they'd have the early breakfast. Sometimes and then they'd go to the shops to get the food for dinner, and then they'd come home, and that could be at 10:30, and then they'd start cooking the dinner, and sometimes the dinner was ready by 11. And then they'd have the dinner at 11:30. so
Middle of the day.
Middle of the day. Everything. And then it was about tea. And even at night time, you'd have crackers. Do you remember the Jacob's cream crackers and cheese on it and all that? Everything was around food. And
I love as well.
And it wasn't because we were food lovers. It just punctuated the day. I think it got you through the day.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, because I'm making this sound like, yes, we celebrate, we all shared and we were pouring olive oil onto our cream crackers. We weren't. We were trying to kind of break up the day with food.
I love how you describe, most people ask that question, they tell you it's all focused on the food and what you ate. You describe how your brain works, like things going into the aga and the place and the room around it and the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so you clearly, like when you
I remember situations and rooms probably far more than the food.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit like, because I sometimes like... I'll do consultations. You might go to see somebody's house and they might decide to put the project on hold for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And they'll come back to me and they said, oh, we met you a couple of years ago, and I really can't remember their faces.
Yeah.
And I'm there, oh God, okay. And then they'll say to me, do you remember the house in Clare with the... And I said, and do you know something? I can even remember what their hot press looks like. I can remember homes and spaces and atmospheres more than I can faces. It can be a bit problematic when you meet somebody on the street. But
when did you realise then that you wanted to turn this into a career?
I never be an architect.
Yeah.
I can't remember ever wanting to be anything else. Like I remember making my decisions going into first year in secondary school based on being an architect and kind of, what do I need? And it's anyway, I made the complete wrong decisions. I should have done totally different subjects, but I didn't. But I can't honestly remember wanting to be anything else. I played with Lego when I was a kid. I wasn't incredibly sporty, so I was always making things. I'd make anything, and anything to do with making stuff. I loved, and I'm just trying to that or a pilot. I wanted to be an airline pilot. They were the two jobs. And I suppose, but my interest in architecture came from, I kind of grew up in Malahide, and then we would have gone down to my granny's farm for the thing, and life was different. Like city and country life was different, and I was fascinated by this. But how I was fascinated by how streets and buildings shaped people's lives. So say going to mass.
This is at an early age.
Yeah. So I always remember like going to mass down in Horsewood Church, just outside Campile. But like even compared to Dublin, back then, women sat on one side of the church, men sat on the other side, and then families sat in the middle. That didn't happen in Malahide. Everybody just sat together at mass. And outside mass, then there was this cattle grid. So people, you found it very difficult to walk in.
Yeah.
And then, but there was these pillars outside, and people used to lean on the pillars as if they were in a bar. And mass was a massive kind of meeting place. After
the weekly meeting.
And even like newspapers were sold outside. It's kind of like all the shops decamped and kind of sold things outside the church. But I was people watching all the time. And so I was obsessed with those pillars and those walls and the height of the walls, because I was thinking that's facilitating chat.
This is a 10-year-old.
Yeah,
kid.
I always remember and then when he used to go to my dad was from Waterford, and he was from outside Dungarvan. And I always remembered what I remember. But the first thing I noticed is, do you remember in schools, they'd have a little low wall around the schools, and they'd have a little dip in the wall in a railing so the kids could get over it. So they have a little step and a dip to get over the wall. The kids, these little details I noticed, the kind of the public buildings, the schools, where people sat on steps. And then, because of my dad's job, we moved to Cairo, right, in Egypt. So I was already obsessed with watching kind of the difference between country life and city life, and how people... I was then thrown into another continent.
What year was that?
Would have been... Oh, this is really going to age me.
In the 80s?
Yeah, well, we'll say that, yeah. Well, it was actually the 70s.
So as a kid, you're dropped in the middle of Egypt.
Yeah, in Cairo. Into like from... I thought suburban Dublin was really busy, right? Yeah. And then I think we were on the 12th floor of an apartment block. I'd never been in a lift before. And then to be living with no garden, nothing, in an apartment block in the middle of the city. And it was overnight. We literally just landed there. But like Cairo was a warm country, right? People ate outside. Like people, I always remember, there's two foods I always remember that I'd never seen before. I know them now. And corn on the cob, right, with all the leaves on it, were thrown into oil barrels, and they were cooked in that, right? And people just ate that on the side of the street, and pita bread. I'd never seen pita bread before. And they used to cycle around with it piled up like a pyramid on a big board on the side. And that was kind of, everybody had pita bread with everything.
Yeah.
That was kind of a staple, and it was really cheap. I remember it being, I don't know, 1p or something at the time. Like, so one piece of pita bread was 1p. And like it's...
Were you excited going over to Egypt, or were you frightened?
Well, I was
ripped out of your...
Yeah, and I didn't want to go. And I didn't want to go because you had to get lots of injections going. That was the main reason, because you had to get lots of inoculation. But no, I didn't want to be there. And it was... But you were thrown into this other world where people lived a very different way. And like, it was jam-packed. Like the metros there, like, they terrified me because there was no door. Like people climbed in windows. They got onto the roofs of buses, and on like everything was just so jam-packed. So seeing how a city that had, I don't know how many million people living in it, operated, and again, it was a Muslim country.
Yeah.
So the speakers were going at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, so everything.
You've come from old Catholic Ireland.
Yeah,
then. It's like,
we didn't even get Saturdays and Sundays off because it was a Muslim country. You had to go to school on Saturday. You got Friday off and you got Sunday off. So we always had to go to school on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So Thursday was like our Friday because Friday was the holy day over there. So it like everything was different, but the people and how like even mosques and the preparation to go into a mosque and the preparation to go into something, like everything was a ritual over there. And that then I just became obsessed with how people lived. So my interest in architecture is not about, and people get confused about architects sometimes, that you're kind of, you just want to leave these kind of monuments to yourself behind. I've no interest in that. I want to make better places for people to live.
Yeah.
And that is sometimes just as important to do streets and cities and squares and schools and public. That's how I ended up in the first job I was talking about, because they did health and education. And I think they're the two most kind of important types of buildings where you're sick and you're learning, you know, because it can be really influential to you. So I'm
surprised by that. That's not what I expected you to say coming in here today. Yeah. I thought it, because it's such a creative thing, there's a certain ego around.
No.
Yeah.
No, like you do this because you're... Are
you proud of what you've done?
Am I proud of what? No, not at all.
Why not?
But I am and I am. I don't know. Am I proud? Yeah, of course. Like, no, I'd say I'm fulfilled. Proud is a very big word. Like that's kind of, yeah. I'm pride is.
Is that not the point of why we work? Is to be
what? To be proud
of what we do?
No, I don't. I'm on a journey.
Yeah.
I still feel like I'm a bit rubbish. I still feel like I have a huge amount to learn. Every time I start into a new project, I feel like it's a chance to start all over again. And from what I've learned from the previous project, I can bring to the next one. I read books all the time. I watch TV programs. I go to lectures. I go to exhibitions. Every time I go, I learn something new, and I want to bring that to what I'm doing. So I kind of... Yeah, if I felt like if something happened and I couldn't work tomorrow, I'd feel a little bit cheated that I haven't got to finish what, and you know, it's not what I'm doing is not that important. But I, for me, the big kick in it all is when I've visited somewhere and seen something really clever, really cool, and then I want to implement that or do a version of that for myself or and like sometimes again, if you're in Canada or if you're in, I don't know, Thailand, it doesn't culturally move. Like you can't design an Irish home like that, but you can learn the methodology. So how they think about things, you can then work that backwards and apply that to how I might design an Irish house. So I'm constantly learning, and I'm constantly excited to try something new, and that I would have learned yesterday or seen yesterday. The
excitement's refreshing. Spending the time here, it's refreshing that someone is so passionate about what they're doing.
There's like I'm just like, and I do feel lucky for that because I found something in life that I absolutely love doing, and it can be a bit like it can be too much sometimes. Like because I do literally read. If you saw the stack of books beside the bed, and most of the people I follow on Instagram are all other architects, and you know,
you could easily have been a chef.
I would have loved to have been a chef. I don't. The only thing about being a chef, like my brother's a chef. So is that on your research notes?
I didn't know that.
There you go. One up on you.
That gives me, well, you know what? Because I'm conscious of Like we could be here for hours.
No, but because the only thing about being, I adore cooking, and it's like that's how I relax. That's when I go home. The biggest treat for me is 4 hours, 5 hours where I'm not under pressure in a kitchen.
Spending time,
but also giving myself the time to go to the shops and go to the right shops and get the right ingredients and get the like I am that person who is on Christmas Eve searching for star anise, and I am like an idiot. Like I've changed a bit since that, but like that's how the one time that I do cook all is over Christmas. Like that's what I do for my Christmas holidays. And there's times I get up and you're in your dirty old tracksuit bottoms and you've got people coming for dinner at 5 o'clock and you've had no shower.
Therapy for the day.
And I'm in my bare feet and I start cooking in the morning because you have to get stuff on and you have to do all that. And it gets to about 4:45 and I'm still standing there because I've been completely lost in it for the whole day. And I'm like that with architecture. Like I can sit with a sketch for 4 or 5 hours and I can lose time completely. I'm the same. I always used to love when I was in college. I am one of these people. I can hyper focus and then I can completely fall asleep. But I remember in college I used to make models during the night. The paper models and card models and all that. And you'd look up and it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I think, oh my God, where's all that time? But I lose myself in things, and I find cooking is something that I can do that I lose myself in, and I love the fact that there's ingredients go into things and they change and they chemically change and they rise and they go down or they slow cook or they, you get the toughest piece of beef and suddenly it's like you drop your knife onto it and it sinks the whole way through.
Endless possibilities.
But my favourite actually is baking. Because the only thing about cooking
doesn't surprise me. Exact science,
yeah. Because I find like my mum and my brother would be really good at. I just swapped that out. I said, what do you mean you swapped it out? Like I find that bit difficult when somebody says you swapped out an ingredient. Because I like to get a recipe and follow it the whole way through. Actually, I made one of yours, and it was your chicken lasagna in the book.
I do.
And your mum has a secret Your mum has a secret ingredient.
She does. We're not supposed to talk about me, but I'll indulge.
Yeah. Anyway, so I made that. That was probably one of the. Was it the last? I made that recently enough, and one of your mum. I won't give the game away, but your mum has a secret ingredient that she puts into it, right?
She does.
Yeah.
You can go for it.
It's cream of Campbell's soup.
She loves
Campbell's cream of chicken soup.
There you go, Monica. Dermot Bannon uses your recipes.
Would you try and find that nowadays? It's really hard. It's hard to find.
There's the watery one, but it's the thick one,
we found it. Yeah. The condensed, because you have to get the condensed one, right? And I found it in a random shop, right? But it was about 4 visits to 4 different supermarkets to try and find this soup, right?
You weren't stopping.
I was not, because I wasn't making without it, right? Made the lasagna, put it into the oven. What was still sitting on the counter?
Don't say the chicken.
Soup.
Did
not go into it. And it still tasted amazing. So
it's a good one.
Yeah.
She knew what she was at.
But that's it now. But if I'd known that, I would. If I hadn't the ingredients, I wouldn't. If I didn't buy that soup, I wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have started.
Yeah.
But yet I made the lasagna. Everybody loved it, and the soup never went into it. So I suppose I need to let go.
Probably killed you for a few days.
But the baking is just because that's an exact science, and I adore baking. I love making any kinds of cake.
Let me throw a few quick fires at you.
Go on.
Just you off the top of your head before we finish up this chat.
Yeah.
What did you have for dinner last night?
What did I have for dinner? I had Jesus after.
You have to be honest.
I am being honest. We had spuds and chicken and veg.
That was it. Just chicken, spuds,
and veg. Yeah, and it was very nice. I actually just like that. I like my favorite dinners is a roast chicken, and it's the one thing that everybody in the house will eat. And if you get a good gravy, I have a really good gravy recipe. Marsala wine, that's the secret.
There you go.
Yeah, and because Marsala wine it elevates it. But I love just making simple food, roast chicken, all of that. But a good roast chicken you can't beat.
Can't beat.
Yeah.
Worst meal of your life?
Worst meal of my life?
Nobody cares about the best meal of anyone's life.
I don't remember there's nothing standing out with the worst meal in my life.
It's generally not the food, it can be the people.
No, I do remember actually the worst food I ever ate was I remember I worked in a pub when I was in college, and it was in England, and they used to have do you remember peperamis? They were like these
they looked like something else.
Oh my God. But I was starving. I'd eaten no dinner and I was really hungry, and they had a glass of pepperami sitting on a shelf, and they were under a light, so they were. And I ate 2 of them well, my God, I was as sick as a dog the next day. I took
Like
me
eating dog food.
and it kind of, I haven't eaten dog food since. That was probably the worst meal. I'm just trying to think the worst meal of mine. I can't remember anything stand out.
And then to finish off, you have 3 people you can invite to your dream dinner party. Who are you going to pick?
Ooh. This is, I know what you want. Like, you want the Barack Obamas and all that, don't you?
Well, no.
No, but I actually.
That's really boring.
That's really boring.
That's no insight into who you are.
Yeah. For a favourite meal, right? And this is probably, obviously there's loads of people I'd love to meet for a dinner party, but for me, family and real friends are that's when I'm the most relaxed.
Yep.
And where I like, again, not having to put on the dinner jacket, going to places. And I just love having people I really know very well. And I'm lucky enough that they do come for dinner. And that's, if you were to ask me, the ideal dinner party is kind of close friends, because other people would be very interested, but you're making conversation. You're trying to, and you know, it's an effort. I think, like, if I had, I don't know, Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey in the house, I'd be delighted.
Place to be swarmed with security.
Well, but even if it wasn't, but like, you'd feel on edge all night, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So and I just love nice food and a bit of chat and a bit of a laugh. And
Food's your escape.
Food is my escape, and dinners and all of that have got to be kind of where I feel really comfortable. Like, I would love to go to a restaurant in a tracksuit, because that's you know, you're completely yourself, and I'd love everybody else around me to be the exact same. And like, for me, the happiest kind of meals I've had is when I've texted people and saying, right, I have put a load of chicken onto the barbecue, no pressure,
Swing round.
and they do. And they're all on the way home from somewhere, or they're doing something, and it's nice. And I sometimes feel the bigger the deal a dinner is, the more effort people make to come over, the more dressed up they get.
You lose the point.
Yeah. And the more you what you call it, the more you I don't know, lose the point is probably the word, but it's the more expectations you have of it. Because I've often been really looking forward to going somewhere, going to a restaurant, and sometimes it just doesn't live up. And so I like the things that what I really love is when I travel when we're doing Incredible Homes, and we kind of tend to go with the same crew of people. And we go out and we try restaurants in every city we're in, and we literally arrive. You've got 4 minutes to dump your stuff in your room and get out, because nobody's waiting for you, and they're all starving. We're all starving. So nobody's getting ready. And we go there. We've been with each other all day, so we don't have to, how are you? And what was last week?
You can switch off.
You can just completely, and it's just, and you have in lovely food, and you're just having a nice chat with people. You've spent all day with them, but it's off time, you know, and I love that.
Dermot Bannon, thank you very much.
That was quick and easy, Mark.
That was brilliant. Such an insight. Thank you very much, genuinely, for your time. If you like what Dermot had to say, you can like and subscribe, leave a review, or even tell a friend about this podcast. And you can also watch our full conversation on YouTube.
Oh, I forgot it was being recorded.
So we dressed up. I'll see you next time. Thank you to Barry's Tea for supporting this podcast. Barry's Tea holds a special place in people's hearts. Not just because it tastes amazing, but because as Irish people, Barry's Tea is one of those special things that connects us with home and that sense of belonging. We drink it in cafes, in restaurants, at book clubs. When we're out hiking, we even bring it on holidays and drink it all over the world. No matter where you are or what you're doing, one sip of Barry's Tea and you're home.